Hi, my name's John Young. Huck, if you're comfortable. So, who am I? Professionally, I'm a registered nurse. I've worked in emergency and pulmonary critical care medicine. Prior to that, I was a volunteer emergency medical technician while I worked my way through school. And concurrently with that, aerospace medical technician with the Maryland Air National Guard, and eventually pinned on officer rank and earned a commission in the Medical Service Corps. So I did my time with the Maryland Guard and got out in 13. Spent the last 3 years of my tour with the Guard full time. So had the unique advantage of being on a wartime footing 9 to 5, and then going home to a house with a young family and all that good stuff. So had to compartmentalize quite a bit. In terms of what brought me to the program. I have had difficult times during my career. As a first responder, I ran an absolutely terrible call that involved other first responders. An emergency vehicle was struck on the response, and it was a mass casualty and all that kind of good stuff. We had a terrible call where we lost a patient and turned out to be the parent of a guy that I went on to work with. So that was always kind of the elephant in the room. In the Guard, lost a close associate. He went over to the desert several times as an Air Force firefighter. And I'm not going to tell his story, but he lost the war to what was going on inside his head. Pulled over on the way to work one day, full time at the base, pulled over on the side of a major thoroughfare and ended his life. It was very difficult because his wife was actually a civilian DAF employee who I supervised. So, my kids had played with their kids and all that kind of good stuff. That one left a mark. So, I got out in 13 and have just kind of drifted, lost that sense of camaraderie, lost that sense of common mission. I've had jobs, but nothing that spoke to my heart the way that my service in the first responder and military fields had. So along the way, I have struggled with alcohol and went through a very nasty divorce, but was fortunate to meet a good woman whose background I think uniquely positioned her to understand who I am and what my experiences are. And she actually sought out Warriors Ascent. Then in speaking with the program staff, it sounded very promising, and I went out and spent an amazing week with this group. So I'd like to talk a little bit about my experience with Warriors Ascent. I got the sense that our cohort, the Mighty 49, the Dirty Dozen, followed sort of the normal path that these groups do. We arrived on day one, late Monday morning, and there was a lot of closed body language, cutting eyes. Nobody wanted to make eye contact with anybody else at the table, and kind of grim faces. I don't think anyone was really happy to be there, with no disrespect to the program staff who went far out of their way to make us feel welcome and were in nearly constant contact with us with regards to logistics. I mean, I flew in from the East Coast. A lot of folks drove. But starting weeks before the show date, the program staff was on the line with me, making sure that I had my, airline tickets and my, billeting and so forth. And, that made me feel very optimistic about the fact that things were probably going to go smoothly from a logistical standpoint. I had the good fortune of arriving Sunday night, again, not driving locally. I flew in early and actually had the chance the evening before to spend some time with the mentor staff for our cohort. And they just absolutely welcomed me with open arms from the moment they picked me up at the airport. I mean, I had door-to-door service. Couldn't have asked for anything smoother. And great guys. They had been through the programs themselves. And told me a little bit of what to expect. They didn't let go any secrets, but they kind of told me the general curve of what to expect, so I felt a little prepared for that. That was time well invested, and I cannot speak highly enough of the mentors that Warriors Ascent chose for our cohort, nor of the guys who took the time to come out and be there as a resource. I thought that was something that really set this program aside, or apart rather. The fact that they had alumni come and help us through the process. So, that first day, we had a lot of classroom. You could see people's eyes kind of start to glaze over a little bit as we had a social worker talking to us about things like cognitive behavioral therapy and biases in thinking and some pretty abstract stuff, but it really set the stage for what was to come later in the week. Suffice it to say that as the week went on, all that closed body language and cutting eyes went away. We became a very cohesive group. We're here several weeks post as I speak to you today, and we are still actively talking to each other, both as a group and individually in some cases. I made solid connections with peers during this Warriors Ascent cohort that I have failed to make in years of trying therapy and AA and Celebrate Recovery and other therapeutic modalities. There is something special about the selection bias with this group. Veterans and first responders are a special breed, and I'm not saying that to brag. I think it's just a fact. And the fact that we shared common experiences, common backgrounds, common calls to service. People typically don't have jobs in these fields. They have callings, they have careers. Allowed us to move very quickly into executing as a group. And, the reticence to talk fell away. People talked. There were tears. There were tears from people who probably can't remember the last time they cried. But the program was that effective. It let us move very quickly through the storming and norming and into the performing phase of this week. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about what's happened since the cohort. Keep in mind that we were there on site in residence at a camp outside of Kansas City. We were eating, sleeping, breathing as a group. It was a pretty insular environment, and we were going from 7:30 in the morning until 9 o'clock at night with, the classroom activity, the outdoor activities, yoga, mindfulness, really trying to peel away some of this armor that a lot of us have built up over the years and have really prevented us moving forward. The program staff took great strides to get us to a place where we felt safe. We felt safe being vulnerable with each other, being raw. I mean, there was language, but sometimes that's part of the story. No one was offended by that. There were tears. Carrie led us through yoga, which for most of us was a new experience. So there was some uneasiness at first and the nervous laughter and all that. But by week's end, I think as a group, we were looking forward to it. I know I was. Warriors Ascent has a couple of unique attributes. We wrote a letter to one of our stressors, and then in a very symbolic way walked, it was almost like a march, walked down a hill with a bagpipe providing background music. And those of us who were comfortable read those letters aloud to the other members of the group, and there was not a word of judgment uttered, nor am I sure even thought. It was a very emotional moment, and at the end of reading that letter, we physically placed it into a fire pit. We burned that stressor in a symbolic way of saying goodbye. And then, in an absolutely brilliant stroke of scheduling, our next move was to a ropes confidence course where we, with safety equipment and spotting, scaled a 40-foot telephone pole, paused at the top, revealed to the group something that we were leaping towards, and then physically jumped from that 40-foot pole 10 feet out to try to hit a ball that was hanging out there as a target. And there was nothing but support during that. I think that moment absolutely fused the cohesion that we felt as a group. There are very few things that will engender trust more than dangling 40 feet off the ground while a couple of your peers hold the other end of the rope and everybody else cheers you on. I mean, it is just a magical confidence building moment. As we continued to move through the week, the focus was on agency. And I think one of the biggest things that I walked away from this week with is, at least cognitively, thinking in my mind, I'm not a victim of circumstances. Rather, I'm a warrior who now has tools to meet these life circumstances and thrive. And that came from the reflection, it came from the action, it came from building the cohesion with 11 of my peers and the program staff. And that was something that I had not felt for a long time. Graduating OTS, graduating some of the schools that we've been through, those were moments, but it's been a long time since those moments. But here again, one of them occurred out in Kansas City. So it was a very, very productive week. And what has followed that week, I think, has been even more important. So I'd like to talk about that for a moment. We went through a very emotionally intense experience, bonded with each other in a very authentic way. And then you come back to reality. And you've got the pressures of work and everything else. And I don't know if anyone else experienced it, but I certainly experienced a little bit of a crash. And that crash has evidenced itself in drinking alcohol more than I should over the past couple of weeks. Now, it's not all doom and gloom. Warriors Ascent has follow-on programs that I'm taking full advantage of. Virtual phone calls, the go-to meeting stuff and all that. Again, I've got this physical distance because I'm located on the East Coast and, the program center of gravity is there in Missouri. But, these calls, these video events allow me to really feel part of this continuing community. We've got the text group chat that those of us in the cohort are very active in. And Carrie from the program staff is in there just as frequently as those of us who are on the other side of the table. So he's continuing to guide us. Carrie's got an entire body of YouTube videos that you can sign into, on your schedule. It allows me to keep up with the yoga discipline. Not as often as I should, I'll be honest. But more than I was prior to going out to Kansas City, which was 0. So I'm looking forward to this Sunday attending an event in person. So what's the nature of my commitment to this? Well, I donated to the Warriors Ascent fundraiser that's going on. The program asks for nothing from me other than my time. Get yourself there, be authentic while you're here, spend the time with us. That was the extent of their ask. But when I got back, I felt so strongly about this that I donated, hoping that will help fund another warrior to attend in the future and realize some of the same results that I have. This Sunday, I'm flying back out to Kansas City for an in-person event, and several of us from the cohort are going to be there. We've only been separated for a couple of weeks, but it feels like a reunion. And again, that's a sense of connection with people that I have not felt in quite some time. So, yeah, it's going to mean a trip on aircraft in the midst of COVID, and that's not awesome, but it's the trade-off I want to make to get back out there and get into the fold that is this Warriors Ascent cohort. So again, kind of a long-winded explanation of what we went through that week, some of the unique attributes that I recognized in the program, the extent of my commitment to it, kind of the struggle that I've had, but this overall burgeoning sense of agency that is arising. And I think that's one of the really important things that Warriors Ascent instilled is we are worthy of respect and honor as people. We have done hard things and we've got some baggage as a result of it, but we are not victims. We are not victims. So I'll close with a thought. I'm not one to give advice, but if I can reach out to any other veteran, any other first responder, whatever your sex, gender, political persuasion, we share common threads in our experience. And if I had the chance to sit down and talk with someone, I would say just don't be as stubborn as I was. It's easy to fall into that trap. I'll just suck it up and drive on. And the ruck just keeps getting heavier and heavier, and you're walking slower and slower. Don't let that time be taken from you. This program is there to help. The people there are amazing, and all it takes is a phone call. They're asking for a week of your time. That's all. I mean, I know I spent far more than a week's time in the depths of my addiction to alcohol. So my words to any fellow veteran, fellow first responder would be, just don't let that time be taken from you. Reach out for help.